What if Oscar found the Omnitrix? Chapter 1. And then there were 10. In the expansive universe there are many stars with several planets in their orbit. However, there was one solar system that was unlike any other. It only had one planet. It was almost like the solar system was just created to home this planet. This planet was called Remnant by the people who live on it. This planet had many species and life forms on it. There was one dominant species with several subspecies on this planet. The most populous species was a bipedal creature with only hair on the top of their heads. They were called humans. The other species looked a lot like the humans, but they had one, or even in some cases two, animalistic features. They were collectively known as faunas. There was one other creature that actually dominated the planet, but they weren't exactly alive. These creatures were known as Grim, and they could be considered to be the predators of the humans and faunas. They roamed most of the planet, forcing the humans and faunas to build 4 stronghold cities the Grim could never get to. At least that's what it appeared. Recently one of these strongholds had fallen and the Grim had moved in. These creatures and recent events made Remnant look like a backwater apocalyptic planet. And that's what the warlord Vilgax thought. Out in the void of space, quite a distance away from Remnant, a massive brown ship is attacking a much smaller teal ship. The large brown ship belonged to Vilgax, a bipedal being with tendrils on his face. Hull damage, 20%, weapons systems still operational, Abiad said. I have come too far to be denied. The Omnitrix shall be mine, and there is not a being in the galaxy that dares stand in my way, Vilgax said. Vilgax's ship then continued to attack the teal ship. Meanwhile down on the planet, a boy with freckles and hazel eyes, wakes up in a panic and sighs in relief after looking around. This boy was called Oscar Pine. That dream again. Why do I keep having that dream? Who even are those two? Oscar asked. It was early in the morning, so early that the sun had barely risen. The boy got dressed and left his room. After having breakfast, he opened the front door to a peaceful country scene with a rising sun and birds tweeting. He walked over to the barn and opened the door. Oscar then sighed. Time to get to work. Again, Oscar said. Oscar then got to working on the farm. Every day he would tend to the fields, the animals on the farm from dawn till dusk. It was hard work, especially since it was spring, and so he needed to work hard so they would have enough food and money to survive through the winter. Oscar was currently plowing one of the fields with the only tractor they had when suddenly there was a bang and smoke started billowing from the tractor. Oscar quickly escaped the tractor. Well, that's great, Oscar said. Oscar walked back to the tractor and wafted the smoke away. Oscar had a look at the engine and could tell that the engine was FUBAR. Great. Just great. Right when we need this rust bucket to work, it goes out and dies on us, Oscar said. Oscar. Are you okay? What was that bang? A voice called out. I'm fine, Aunt Emma, but I can't say the same for the tractor, Oscar said. Emma sighed. Come in for lunch. I'll have a look at it later, Emma said. Okay, Oscar said. Oscar then entered the house. Oscar and his aunt, Emmanuelle, were the only ones living on the farm. Oscar had lost his parents many years ago and his aunt had taken him in. Whilst eating, Oscar looked out of a window that showed the trail out of their farm and to a small town just up the trail. Car. Oscar, Emma called. Huh, what? Oscar said. Emma sighed. Daydreaming out one day leaving the farm and leaving me all alone? Emma asked. What? No. I mean, I do want to leave someday. But I'm not going to leave you all alone. Not after all you've done for me, Oscar said. Emma chuckled. I know. But you may never leave this place. When Beacon fell, many men and women died warding off the Grim, so there's no one we can hire to work on the farm. And with our remote location, no one is going to come stay out here, Emma said. I know. I just wish I could go out and explore the world, Oscar said. Well, if you were listening to me instead of daydreaming, you would have heard me say that I need you to run my errands for me whilst I fix the tractor. We need that thing running if we're going to make it through the winter. If not, then Emma said. Then we won't be able to sustain our farm, Oscar said. Oscar and Emma stayed silent for a while as they thought about their possible future. Anyways. What do you need me to do? Oscar asked. Emma then gave Oscar a list and sent him on his way as she started to work on the tractor. Back up in space the battle was continuing, though both ships were significantly closer to Remnant. Their propulsion systems have been destroyed, Abayad said. Prepare to board. I want the Omnitrix, now Vilgax said. On the teal ship an alien with 3 eyes was trying her best to stop Vilgax. She aimed a shot at the bridge of Vilgax's ship and fired. The laser shot hit and destroyed the bridge and sent Vilgax across the room. Several robots were sent out from Vilgax's ship. The teal ship was able to destroy most of them, but 2 managed to breach the hull of her ship. She quickly jumped into action. She left the cockpit and closed the door on one robot whilst destroying the other with her telekinetic powers. She then headed to a pod and then placed a strange watch in it. Sorry to bring you back into this, old friend, the alien said. She then headed to a stasis chamber, but as she was about to go into stasis the robot began to cut through the door. Also, Vilgax's ship shot a huge laser blast at the teal ship, completely destroying the rear end of her ship. The pod containing the weird watch the jettisoned down to Remnant. Down on Remnant, Oscar was making his way back to the farm. Night had fallen and Oscar was looking up into space watching the stars. A meteor then shot through the sky, catching Oscar's eyes. Whoa! A shooting star, Oscar said. The shooting star then instantly changed course and was now heading towards Oscar. Oscar gasped and started running away. The meteor crashed down behind him, sending a shockwave which launched Oscar away and sent smoke and debris into the air. As the smoke cleared, Oscar looked on at the crash site. Oscar then got up and walked up for a closer look. That's not a meteorite, Oscar said. Whatever had crashed to the ground was not a meteorite. It was a spherical metal ball. What even is this thing? Is Atlas trying to put the CCTS in space to connect Vale back up to the system? Oscar questioned. Oscar leaned at the edge of the crater, but the ground he was standing on began to crumble beneath him, sending him sliding down to the metal ball. The pod then opened and a green light in the shape of an hourglass shone from the pod. A watch. Why is Atlas sending a watch into space? Oscar questioned. Oscar then slowly reached out his left hand towards the watch. The watch then leaped out of the pod and latched onto Oscar's arm. Ah! Get off me! Get off, Oscar yelled. Oscar frantically tried ripping the watch off his wrist, to the point of losing balance and falling over. Oscar then climbed out of the crater. Back at the farm, Emma started to worry about Oscar. What is taking him so long? He should have been back by now. I guess it's taking him longer to do my rounds since this is his first time, Emma said. Oscar tried pulling the watch off but was unsuccessful. He then looked around for a release mechanism. He found a button just below the face of the watch. Oscar pressed it, but instead of releasing the watch's face popped up. Whoa, Oscar said. Oscar glanced around the woods and then back to the watch. The hourglass had now morphed into a diamond which encased a black silhouette. What is that thing? Oscar asked. The silhouette was lanky with 4 legs and had 2 jaw-like shapes protruding from its shoulders, and it looked like there was a face in the middle. Oscar then pressed the faceplate back down, thinking that would make the silhouette go away, which it did. But then Oscar began to feel very weird. His left arm began to turn into vines which started from the watch. The process continued up his body and now Oscar was no longer human, he was something else. He was a monster. Ah! I'm being consumed by a plant, Oscar yelled. Oscar then began to calm down. And I'm all right. Wait. Am I even being eaten by a plant? Oscar questioned. Oscar then moved his arms and opened and closed his hands. I'm doing this. What have I turned into? Oscar asked. Oscar then heard a howl. Oh no, Oscar said. Several juvenile beowulfs then emerged from the forest. Oscar then began to back away. One of the beowulfs then leapt at Oscar. Oscar turned and crouched down. As the beowulf was about to make contact, several fruit pods on his back exploded, killing the beowulf. Oscar then stood up and looked at his back. I did that. Cool, Oscar said. Oscar then turned to face the remaining Grimm. Let's see how you like explosive fruit, Oscar yelled. Oscar then grabbed 2 fruits from his back and flung them at the beowulfs, killing 2 more, leaving 1 left. Come at me, Oscar yelled. The beowulf charged at Oscar. Oscar got ready to punch the beowulf, but instead of punching it, the Grimm was then snared in vines that extended from Oscar's fist. Not what I planned, but... Nice, Oscar said. Oscar then pulled his arm back and then whipped the Grimm up into the air, sending it flying away. This is awesome. But what even am I? And who made this thing? Definitely not Atlas. Did it come from space? Am I an alien? Oscar asked. Oscar then realized that it had gotten very late. I should get back to the farm. Aunt Em must be very worried. But how am I going to explain this? Oscar asked, looking at himself again. I guess one word at a time, Oscar said. Oscar then stretched out his arm and picked up his aunt's basket. He then turned towards the farm. Oscar then looked at the trees along the path. I wonder, Oscar said. Oscar then stretched his arm and wrapped it around a tree branch. Oscar then pulled himself towards it. Woohoo, Oscar yelled as he began to swing from tree to tree. As he was approaching the farm, the watch began to bleep. What's happening now? Oscar asked. Oscar quickly found out what that bleeping meant. Oscar found himself transforming back to normal mid-swing. Oscar then crashed to the ground and rolled for a few feet. Ow, Oscar said. Oscar then stood up. He was covered in dirt and scratches but hadn't suffered any severe injuries. Oscar then continued back to the farm. Oscar exited the woods and saw Emma standing at the front gate. Emma then ran up towards Oscar and hugged him. Oscar. What happened to you? Emma asked. I ran into a couple of Grimm. I ran away but they almost caught me. Luckily a huntsman was nearby and saved me, Oscar said. I see. Where is this huntsman? Surely he didn't just leave you after killing the Grimm? Emma asked. He didn't, but as we were about to exit the forest, he had to go, Oscar said. Well, I hoped you thanked him, Emma said. I did, Oscar said. Now let's patch you up and get you something to eat, Emma said. The two began to walk to the hosier when Emma noticed the watch on Oscar's wrist. She recognized the symbol on the face of the watch. What is that thing on your wrist? Is it a watch? Emma asked. I think so, Oscar said. Where did you get it? Emma asked. Miss Ting LW gave it to me. She said she found it one day. She has no idea how it works, or even how to make it show the time, Oscar said. I see. You better have thanked her, Emma said. I did, Oscar said. Good. Now let's get you patched up. Emma then took Oscar into their house and patched him up. Meanwhile, up above Remnant, Vilgax's ship was being repaired whilst an incredibly mutilated Vilgax was in a stasis tank. What do you mean it's not there? This battle nearly costs me my life. And you say the Omnitrix is no longer on board the transport? Vilgax asked. Sensors indicate a probe was jettisoned from the ship, just before boarding. It landed on the planet below, Abiad said. Vilgax turned to a larger robot. Go. Bring it to me, Vilgax said. A pod then shot from Vilgax's ship above orbit, landing deep in the woods, next to the Omnitrix's pod. It scanned the area and then promptly disintegrated the pod in the crash site and ejected two smaller flying droids from its shoulders to go find the watch. Back at the farm, Oscar had been patched up and had eaten. Oscar then had a shower before heading to bed. But he didn't go to sleep. Instead, he snuck out of his room through the window and headed to the edge of the farm. What else can you do? Turning me into a plant can't be the only this watch does, Oscar said. Oscar popped the face up again and then twisted the watch's face. Another silhouette appeared on the face. Oscar continued to twist the watch until it returned it his first transformation. Seems like I can transform into 10 different aliens. This thing is out of this world. Literally, Oscar said. Oscar then began to twist the dial again until landing upon a dog-like creature. This one looks like a dog. I wonder what it can do, Oscar said. Oscar then slammed the face down and began to transform into this dog creature. His body started to be covered in orange fur with claws. Oscar then realized he could not see, at least not normally. This transformation had gills on its neck allowing to sense things around him like a radar. Oscar then roared and ran into the forest. Little did he know that Emma had seen and heard the orange creature. What is that doing here? Emma asked. Emma then left the house and went to where the creature was. She found a tuft of fur on the ground. She picked it up and headed back to her house and then down to the basement. Oscar swung across from tree to tree. He stops on one before sensing one of Vilgax's mechadroids targeting him, leaping away before it can shoot him. He leapt to other trees, evading the pursuing mechadroid's lasers. He's able to sneak out of its sight, leap up behind it, land on top of it, and rip off its laser arm and head. The Omnitrix starts timing out as the mechadroid's body is headed straight into the side of a cliff. Oscar leaps off before it crashes and transforms back to normal. Yes, Oscar said. A second mechadroid then arrived in the area. The mechadroid scanned the area before moving off. It had completely missed Oscar, who had ran behind a tree to hide. Oscar then decided to head back home before the mechadroid or Grim found him, and before Emma noticed he was gone. Oscar arrived back home climbing through the same window he left from. Oscar then heard footsteps walking up the stairs. He quickly climbed into bed and closed his eyes. Emma then opened the door to his room. Oscar, Emma said. Home. What is it? Oscar asked. Did you hear a creature roar coming from the edge of the farm? Emma said. A roar? I didn't hear anything. Is everything okay? Oscar asked. Everything's fine. I guess the stress of the tractor breaking down is getting to me, Emma said. Then you should get some rest. You won't be able to fix it if you're hearing and seeing things, Oscar said. You're right. Good night, Oscar, Emma said. Night, Oscar said. Emma then left the Oscar's room. She could tell that Oscar wasn't telling the truth. And he should have heard that roar considering his room faced the direction it came from, and his window was open. Emma decided to let it slide for tonight. She entered her room and climbed into bed. She had just closed her eyes, when she heard an explosion in the distance. Her eyes shot open and she quickly left her room, Oscar doing the same. The two left the house to see a large fire coming from the village. Oscar. Stay inside, Emma said. Emma then picked up a shotgun. If I don't come back, assume I'm dead, Emma said. But Oscar said. No buts. Stay inside, Emma said. Emma then ran towards the village. Sorry, but I can't do that, Oscar said. Oscar then followed after his aunt but made sure to stay far enough behind her. Emma arrived at the village to see a giant mechadroid destroying the village. Hey ugly, over here, Emma yelled, shooting at the mechadroid. The robot moved towards her and picked her up. Emma then shot the robot in the face. The robot began to charge a laser shot from its head. Leave her alone. You want somebody to pick on? Oscar asked. He was now transformed into a crystal creature. The robot scanned him and seized the Omnitrix. Try me, Oscar said. The robot dropped Emma and blasted Oscar away. He lands in a building, which the robot also immediately blows up. A Petrosapien, Emma questioned. Oscar managed to cut himself out with his arm now formed into a blade. He examined his arm and produced tiny spikes from it. Cool, Oscar said. The robot started walking towards Oscar. He decided to test out his new blade arm and attacked with it. The robot jumps in the air to avoid it, spinning its 3 legs and falling down onto Oscar. Uh-oh. Think I'm in trouble, Oscar said. Emma then got up to help the civilians. What is going on here, Ting LW asked. I have no idea, Emma said. Ting LW hesitates as Emma runs off to help others, but runs once the giant robot throws Oscar into her truck, just barely missing her. As Oscar was dodging various laser blasts, a stray one hits a tree, causing it to fall down exactly where Emma was standing. Emma stands, wide-eyed, as the tree before her splits perfectly in two and falls to her sides. Oscar was in front of her, having grown a mountain of spikes out of his back to cut it. You okay, Oscar asked. Yes. Thank you, Emma said. The robot then suddenly grabbed Oscar. Oh, Oscar said. The robot lifted Oscar up and grabs his left arm with its other hand. Oscar the created spiked in his left arm to destroy the robot's arm. The robot then shoots a laser blast from its palm, sending Oscar into another building. Oscar got up and tries using his arms to block the next blast. He does momentarily, as the laser reflects off his arms, sending split beams to fly in all directions. However, Oscar couldn't hold it and is pushed back, but now, on the ground, he got an idea. Getting up, he approached the robot. Come on. Burn one in here, Oscar said, pointing at his chest. The robot fired its next shot and Oscar held up his palms. The laser hits his palms and starts pushing him back. He digs in with spikes from his feet. What comes around, goes around. Let's see how you like it, ya techno freak, Oscar said. Oscar then began reflecting the laser. He then moved his palms to cut the robot in half with its own laser. The townsfolk then began to cheer as Oscar looked over his handiwork. Who are you, Emma asked. Oscar turned around. Just someone who wants to do what is right. Now I must be off, Oscar said. Oscar then ran off. What is a Petrosapien doing on Remnant? Wait. It had that same symbol on Oscar's watch, Emma said. Emma then began to run back home. Failure. Unbelievable. The puny remnant being that is keeping the Omnitrix from me. Will soon hang on my trophy wall. Scan the planet. If this being is already able to defeat my dryodes, then I'll need some help. Thankfully all planets are the same when it comes down to what beings will do for the right price. Find one such group, Vilgax said. Emma then arrived back at the farm. Oscar saw her arrive back and ran up to her. Oscar. I told you to, Emma said. Oscar then hugged Emma. I'm glad you're okay, Oscar cried. Emma smiled and hugged Oscar back. Whatever was going on, she could worry about it later. All that mattered to her was Oscar, though she did take a quick look at the watch and saw the dial was now red instead of green. Emma and Oscar then went back inside and went to get some much-needed sleep before the sun rose. Meanwhile, in a dark place, several people were gathered around a table. At the head of the table was a woman with white skin and red lines. Suddenly a pod crashed through the roof. As the dust settled and Bayard stepped out. End of Chapter 1.